The evening had been planned for months, and everyone who stepped into the grand concert hall could feel it was not an ordinary night. Soft golden lights reflected off polished marble floors, and the low sound of quiet conversations floated through the air like a gentle hum. People arrived dressed in their finest clothes, some holding printed tickets carefully, others taking photos near the entrance as if they were attending something historic. This pianist was not just famous. He was celebrated, respected, and admired across countries. His performances were known for their power and perfection. Critics often described his music as flawless and commanding. Audiences believed that listening to him live was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Many people in the hall had waited years to see him play in person. Inside, the hall slowly filled. Rows of red velvet seats curved around the grand stage. At the center stood a glossy black piano, perfectly positioned under a single bright spotlight. It looked untouched and sacred, almost like it was waiting patiently for its master. The silence around it carried a kind of respect. Among the crowd were music students, elderly couples, wealthy patrons, and ordinary people who had saved money just to be there. Each person carried their own reason for attending. Some wanted inspiration, some wanted to feel close to greatness, and some simply wanted to escape their daily routine for a few hours. There was also a woman sitting quietly several rows back. She arrived early and chose a seat away from attention. Her clothes were neat but simple. Nothing about her appearance suggested she belonged to the glamorous world surrounding her. She did not take photos or talk much. She simply sat there with her hands folded, looking toward the stage with calm focus. She had come alone, not because she had no one, but because this night felt personal to her. The piano on stage stirred something deep inside her. Memories she rarely allowed herself to visit, memories of long hours, tired fingers, and dreams that once burned brightly. As the lights dimmed slightly, excitement rose. Conversations faded into whispers, then into silence. The announcer stepped onto the stage and spoke briefly, praising the pianist's achievements, mentioning awards, sold-out tours, and years of success. The audience listened closely, clapping politely after every sentence. Then the announcer stepped away, and the hall fell completely silent. From the side of the stage, the pianist appeared, tall, confident, and calm. His posture showed someone who knew he belonged there. Applause erupted instantly, loud and enthusiastic. Some people stood up, others cheered softly. The pianist acknowledged them with a small smile and a slight bow, clearly used to this level of admiration. He sat at the piano slowly, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands gently on the keys. Before playing a single note, he paused, letting the silence stretch. It was a silence filled with anticipation, the kind that makes people hold their breath. Then he began. The music flowed effortlessly, each note sharp and clear, filling the hall with emotion. His fingers moved quickly but gracefully, as if the piano was an extension of his body. The audience listened in complete focus. Some closed their eyes, others leaned forward, unwilling to miss even a moment. The performance continued, piece after piece, each met with applause and admiration. The pianist seemed relaxed, even playful at times, enjoying his control over the room. He knew every sound, every pause, and every reaction. The stage belonged entirely to him. During a brief pause between pieces, he stood up, turned toward the audience, and spoke. His voice carried confidence and charm. He joked lightly about the difficulty of the music, about how many hours it took to perfect. The crowd laughed warmly, comfortable in his presence. He scanned the audience slowly, his eyes moving across faces, as if searching for something amusing, something different. Then his gaze paused briefly, landing on the woman sitting quietly in her seat. She noticed his eyes on her and looked up, slightly confused. She did not smile or wave. She simply met his gaze for a moment before looking back at the stage, unaware that this brief moment would change the course of the entire evening. The pianist smiled faintly, an expression that suggested confidence mixed with amusement. He spoke again, his tone light, playful, and casual. He made a comment about how music belongs to everyone, not just professionals. The audience laughed again, thinking it was just friendly talk. The woman shifted slightly in her seat, a small sense of unease passing through her. She had no idea why her heart started beating faster. She tried to calm herself, reminding herself she was just another face in a large crowd. Around her, people whispered quietly, praising the pianist, discussing his technique, comparing this performance to recordings they had heard. No one paid attention to her. No one noticed the way her hands tightened together, or the way her eyes remained fixed on the piano. The hall felt warm, filled with admiration and excitement. No one expected anything unusual to happen. This was meant to be a smooth, perfect concert, just like all the others before it. The pianist returned to his seat and played again, his confidence clear in every movement. The music rose and fell like waves, pulling the audience along. When the final note of the piece ended, applause filled the hall once more. As the clapping slowly died down, the pianist stood again, and this time his smile was different. There was a hint of curiosity in it. He looked toward the audience once more, his gaze drifting back to the same quiet woman. She felt it again, that strange pull, that feeling of being seen when she wanted nothing more than to remain invisible. She lowered her eyes, hoping the moment would pass, but the evening was only just beginning, and the atmosphere in the hall was slowly shifting. Though no one realized it yet, the prestigious night, filled with admiration and expectation, was about to take a turn that would leave every person in that room forever changed. The woman took a slow breath, unaware that her quiet presence had already set something in motion. Something that would soon test pride, reveal hidden truth, and remind everyone in the hall that greatness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits silently, in the most unexpected place. The pause after the last round of applause felt different from the others. It lingered a little longer, as if the air itself was waiting for something unexpected to happen. The famous pianist stood near the piano, his hands resting casually at his sides, a relaxed smile on his face. He looked comfortable, almost playful, like someone who knew he had already won the room. He glanced across the audience again. Slowly this time, his eyes moving row by row. People straightened in their seats when his gaze passed over them. Some smiled, some whispered to the person next to them. Everyone felt seen in some small way. Being noticed by someone so admired felt special, even if it lasted only a second. Then his eyes settled once more on the same woman sitting quietly among the crowd. She did not notice right away. She was still absorbing the music, letting the last notes echo in her mind. Her thoughts were far from the bright lights and the watching crowd. They were somewhere else, somewhere softer and quieter. She had almost forgotten where she was. The pianist tilted his head slightly, studying her. She did not look like the rest of the audience, not because she stood out, but because she blended in too well. No flashy clothes, no eager smile, no phone raised to capture the moment. She sat with a calm stillness, her hands resting together, her posture relaxed but alert, like someone who was listening with her whole being. A small spark of amusement crossed his face. He leaned slightly toward the microphone and spoke again, his voice smooth and confident, carrying easily through the hall. He made another light comment about music being a shared language, about how anyone could feel it, not just trained professionals. The audience responded with soft laughter, nodding along, enjoying his charm. Then he gestured toward the crowd and said something that made a few people chuckle louder. He suggested that sometimes it was good to hear music played by someone unexpected. Someone with no pressure, no reputation to protect, just pure instinct. His tone sounded casual, playful, almost harmless. Some people looked around, unsure of where this was going. The woman felt a strange shift in her chest. She looked up just in time to see him gesturing gently in her direction. Not sharply, not accusingly, but clearly enough that those around her began to turn their heads. She froze. For a brief moment, she thought she must be mistaken. She glanced behind her, then to the side, as if trying to find who he was really pointing at. But there was no one else reacting. The people beside her were already looking at her with curiosity and surprise. Her heart began to beat faster. The pianist smiled wider and spoke again, this time directly, inviting her to come up on stage and try playing a few notes. He said it lightly, like it was no big deal, like he was offering a friendly challenge, or maybe just a bit of fun for the crowd. A wave of quiet laughter rolled through the hall. Some people smiled politely, others exchanged glances, a few leaned forward with interest. Most assumed this was just a harmless joke, a way to entertain the audience between performances. After all, the woman did not look like a performer. She did not look like someone who belonged on that stage. The woman felt heat rush to her face. Her first instinct was to shake her head, to stay exactly where she was, invisible and safe among the seats. Her body felt heavy, like it refused to move. Every part of her wanted the moment to pass quickly, to dissolve like a misunderstanding. She gave a small, hesitant smile and lifted one hand slightly, a quiet gesture meant to decline, hoping the pianist would laugh it off and move on. But he noticed. He laughed gently and encouraged her again, reassuring her that it was just for fun, that there was no pressure, that the audience would enjoy it. His words were smooth, and his confidence made refusal feel awkward, almost rude. The crowd's attention intensified. People nearby began whispering softly, some urging her to go, others watching closely to see what she would do. A few smiled with curiosity, already imagining an awkward, amusing moment, something to talk about later. The woman swallowed hard. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her now, the warmth of the lights, the weight of expectation. Her hands trembled slightly, and she folded them together to steady herself. Her thoughts raced, memories flashing through her mind. Memories she had buried deep, memories of lessons, of practice rooms, of music that once meant everything. She told herself that those days were long gone. She was no longer that person, no longer someone who belonged near a grand piano under a bright spotlight. She was just an ordinary woman in the audience, and this invitation, playful or not, felt like stepping into a world she had closed the door on years ago. The pianist waited patiently, still smiling. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. The audience sensed it too. Laughter faded, replaced by a tense curiosity. Slowly, she nodded. It was not a confident nod, more like a quiet surrender to the moment. She rose from her seat carefully. Her legs felt unsteady as she stepped into the aisle. A few people clapped softly, encouraging her. Others watched with raised eyebrows, unsure of what to expect. She kept her eyes down as she walked forward, each step echoing loudly in her ears. The distance from her seat to the stage felt far longer than it really was. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, to apologize, to sit down again. But something else pushed her forward. As she reached the steps leading up to the stage, she hesitated, placing one foot on the first step. Then stopping, the bright lights felt harsher up close. The stage suddenly looked enormous, exposed, unforgiving. The pianist stepped slightly aside, giving her space, still wearing that calm, confident expression. To him, this was entertainment, a light moment in an already successful night. To her, it felt like standing at the edge of a forgotten past. She climbed the steps slowly and stepped onto the stage. The applause grew louder for a moment, then softened as people settled in, ready to watch whatever would happen next. Standing beside the piano, she felt very small. The instrument loomed in front of her, its polished surface reflecting the lights above. She could see her own reflection faintly in it. Her face looked different up close, older, more serious, marked by years of responsibility and sacrifice. She took a deep breath. The pianist gestured toward the bench, inviting her to sit. He leaned against the piano casually. His body language relaxed, confident that this moment belonged to him, that he was still in control. She sat down carefully, smoothing her clothes without realizing it. Her hands rested in her lap. She did not touch the keys yet. The piano felt both familiar and distant, like seeing an old friend after many years apart. A hush fell over the hall. The woman stared at the keys, black and white, perfectly aligned. Memories stirred again, stronger this time. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if remembering shapes and patterns they had not followed in a long time. The pianist spoke softly, telling her to play anything she liked, even just a few notes. He chuckled lightly, trying to keep the mood easy, playful. The audience waited. Some expected clumsy sounds, hesitant tapping, maybe a quick laugh and a retreat back to her seat. Others simply enjoyed the tension, the unpredictability of it all. The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment. Inside, she reminded herself that this was just a piano, just keys, just sound, no judges, no exams, no expectations. She told herself that whatever happened, it would be over quickly. She lifted her hands slowly and placed them above the keys. The room felt impossibly quiet. Her fingers hovered there, suspended between fear and memory, between the life she lived now and the one she had once dreamed of. The famous pianist watched closely, still relaxed, still confident. unaware that the moment he had created as a joke was already slipping beyond his control. The woman took another steady breath, and in that breath, something shifted. The audience leaned in, sensing that whatever came next would not be as simple as they had expected. The playful invitation, the laughter, the lighthearted mood, all of it had led to this exact second. No one spoke, no one moved. The entire hall waited for the first sound, unaware that the joke meant to entertain them was about to open a door that could never again be closed. The sound of quiet laughter drifted through the hall, soft at first, then spreading like a ripple across the seats. It was not cruel laughter, but it carried something uncomfortable, something uncertain, as if people were not sure whether they were supposed to enjoy the moment or feel awkward about it. The woman sat at the piano bench, still and silent, her hands resting in her lap. The bright lights made the stage feel warmer than the rest of the hall, and she could feel her heartbeat in her ears, loud and steady, every second stretching longer than the last. From where she sat, the audience looked different now, no longer a faceless crowd. She could see individual expressions, raised eyebrows, curious smiles, doubtful looks. Some people leaned forward with interest, others crossed their arms, waiting to be entertained. A few whispered to each other, their voices low but not quiet enough to disappear completely. Some wondered if she even knew how to play. Others assumed she would press a few random keys and laugh it off, a harmless joke, something to break the formality of the night, a moment they would forget by the time they reached home. The famous pianist stood nearby, relaxed and confident, one hand resting lightly on the piano, the other tucked casually into his pocket. His posture showed no concern. To him, this was still part of the performance, a playful interruption, a reminder that he controlled the room. He glanced at the audience and smiled, as if sharing an inside joke with them. His body language suggested ease, comfort, certainty. The woman felt that certainty pressing down on her. She had not planned for this moment. She had not even imagined it. Sitting there now felt unreal, like stepping into a dream that did not belong to her anymore. Her mind told her she did not belong on that stage, that she should stand up, apologize quietly, and return to her seat. But her body did not move. Her fingers tingled slightly, a strange sensation she had not felt in years. It surprised her, and that surprise brought a wave of memories she had tried hard to forget. Early mornings, quiet rooms, the steady rhythm of practice, the sound of a piano filling empty spaces. She pushed the thoughts away. This was not the time, not the place. The pianist leaned closer and spoke softly, encouraging her to try, even if it was just one note. His voice was calm, almost kind, but there was still that hint of amusement underneath, like he expected nothing remarkable to happen. The audience waited. The silence grew heavier, no longer playful, no longer light. It wrapped around the room, making people shift in their seats. Someone coughed softly. Another cleared their throat. The woman lifted her eyes from her lap and looked at the keys. They were clean, perfectly aligned, untouched since the pianist had last played. Under the lights, the black keys gleamed faintly. The white ones looked almost too bright, too exposed. Her hands trembled slightly. She noticed it and pressed her palms gently together, trying to steady them. She reminded herself to breathe slowly, deeply, the way she used to during moments of pressure long ago. A thought crossed her mind, simple and quiet, just a few notes, then it will be over. That idea brought her a small sense of relief. She raised her hands and hovered them over the keys, not touching yet, just feeling the familiar distance. The space her fingers remembered even if her mind doubted. The pianist watched closely now, his smile fading just a little, replaced by curiosity. He had expected quick movement, awkward tapping, maybe nervous laughter, but instead he saw focus, hesitation that looked thoughtful, not clumsy. The audience sensed it too. The whispers stopped. The woman closed her eyes briefly, blocking out the lights, the faces, the pressure. She imagined a quiet room, a place where sound mattered more than judgment, where mistakes were lessons, not failures. When she opened her eyes again, they were calm. She lowered her hands slowly, and her fingers touched the keys. A single note rang out, clear, steady, controlled. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it was confident. The sound traveled through the hall, bouncing gently off the walls, and something shifted instantly. The laughter that had lingered moments earlier disappeared completely, replaced by silence so deep it felt fragile. No one moved. The woman played another note, then another, her fingers finding their place with surprising ease, as if they had been waiting for permission all along. The pianist straightened slightly. His relaxed posture stiffened, just a little. His eyes narrowed with focus. He leaned in, listening more carefully now, the playful mood slipping away from him without him fully realizing it. The audience held its breath. These were not random sounds, not hesitant taps. The notes connected, forming a shape, a direction, something intentional. The woman's shoulders relaxed as she continued. Her hands moved gently, carefully at first, like someone stepping onto familiar ground after a long absence. Each note seemed to give her more confidence, more space to breathe. Her face changed. The tension softened, replaced by concentration. Her brow smoothed. Her lips pressed together lightly. She looked neither nervous nor proud, just present, completely absorbed in what she was doing. The piano responded to her touch. The sound grew warmer, fuller, carrying emotion that did not need explanation. It was not flashy, not fast, but it held something honest, something raw. The audience began to understand that this was not a joke anymore. People exchanged glances, eyes widening slightly. A few leaned back in their seats, surprised by the shift. Someone near the front covered their mouth softly, as if afraid to break the moment. The pianist took a small step back. For the first time that evening, he was not in control of the room. The woman played on, her fingers moving more freely now, the hesitation fading with each passing second. The piano felt less like an object on a stage and more like a voice she had been missing. Memories returned, but they no longer hurt. They guided her. Her hands remembered patterns, rhythms, spaces between notes. Even after all these years, the muscle memory was still there, waiting patiently beneath doubt and fear. The hall remained silent. No coughs, no whispers, no movement. The audience was fully captured, pulled into the sound unfolding before them. Time seemed to slow, seconds stretching, blending together. The woman's breathing matched the rhythm of her playing, steady and calm. She no longer thought about the crowd, or the pianist, or the reason she was there. She existed only in the music, in the connection between her fingers and the keys. The pianist watched with growing disbelief. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock, then to something quieter, something closer to humility. He realized, too late, that he had misjudged her completely, that the moment he had treated lightly carried weight far beyond his intention. The audience felt it too. This was not performance for applause. This was something deeper, something personal, something that demanded respect. As the woman continued, the music grew richer, more layered, emotions rising and falling gently. It spoke without words, telling a story no one expected to hear that night. The hall, once filled with admiration for fame and reputation, now listened to something purer, something unplanned, something real. And in that silence, in that unexpected harmony, every person present began to realize that they were witnessing something rare. Not just skill, but courage. Not just talent, but truth. The joke had vanished completely. In its place stood a moment no one would forget. A moment born from doubt and awkward laughter, transformed into something powerful and unforgettable. The woman's fingers continued to move, steady and sure, and with each note, the crowd drifted further away from expectation and closer to wonder, unaware that this was only the beginning of what the night was about to reveal. The woman's fingers moved across the keys with a quiet confidence that surprised even her. But what no one in the hall could see was the long road that had led her to this moment. A road filled with choices, sacrifices, and silence that stretched back many years, long before she ever sat in that audience seat. Music had been the center of her world, not as a hobby, not as a passing interest, but as a language she learned before she fully understood words, as a child. She spent hours sitting beside an old piano, her feet barely touching the floor, her ears tuned closely to every sound it made. Back then, the piano was not polished or grand. It had chipped keys and a faded surface, but to her it felt alive. Every note felt like a small discovery. Every melody felt like a secret she was allowed to uncover. She practiced not because she was told to, but because she wanted to, because something inside her felt right when she played. Her days followed a simple rhythm: school, chores, and then the piano. She would sit and play until her fingers felt tired, stopping only when the light outside faded or when someone gently reminded her it was time to rest. Music was not an escape for her. It was home. As she grew older, others began to notice her talent. Teachers paused longer when listening to her play. Neighbors gathered quietly outside doors during practice. Small competitions led to larger ones, and soon her life began to fill with schedules, expectations, and dreams that felt both exciting and heavy. She trained seriously, waking early, practicing late, repeating the same passages until her hands ached. She learned discipline, precision, and patience. She learned how to hide mistakes and how to push through fear. Applause became familiar, but so did pressure. For a long time, she believed this path was certain, that music would carry her forward, that the piano would always be there waiting. But life rarely follows the plans we make when we are young. Responsibilities came quietly at first, then all at once, family needs grew, circumstances changed, and choices had to be made. Choices that did not come with applause or recognition. Choices that required letting go of dreams without fully saying goodbye. She told herself it was temporary, that she would return to music when things settled, when there was more time, more space, more freedom. But days turned into months, months into years, and the piano became something she carried inside instead of something she touched. Her hands adjusted to different work, different routines, different kinds of tiredness. Music faded into the background, not forgotten, but carefully folded away, like a letter too painful to reread. She attended concerts occasionally, always sitting quietly, always leaving before the crowd. She listened with admiration and restraint, never clapping too loudly, never drawing attention. She convinced herself that watching was enough, that listening was enough, but the truth was, every performance stirred something restless inside her. Every melody reminded her of who she once was, and who she might have been. She learned to live with that feeling, to carry it gently, without letting it overwhelm her. Now, sitting on the stage, those memories flowed back with unexpected clarity, not as regret, but as understanding. Her hands remembered the discipline, her heart remembered the joy, and her mind finally allowed both to exist together. The audience saw only a woman playing beautifully, unaware of the years of silence behind each note, unaware of the mornings she chose responsibility over rehearsal, the evenings she chose rest over repetition, the nights she lay awake listening to music only in her head. The pianist standing nearby began to sense it, not through logic, but through sound, the way her playing carried depth rather than display, the way her pauses felt intentional, the way each note seemed connected to something unseen. This was not someone showing off, this was someone remembering. Her fingers moved with honesty, not rushing, not seeking approval. The music unfolded like a story told quietly, confidently, without explanation. It spoke of patience, of endurance, of love that never fully disappears. The crowd leaned into that sound, drawn not by fame or spectacle, but by truth. Many of them did not know why they felt emotional, only that something real was happening in front of them. The woman herself was no longer thinking about the past as something lost. She felt it standing beside her, supporting her, reminding her that nothing learned with love ever truly fades. It only waits. As she played, she became aware of how much she had grown beyond the girl she once was. Her playing now carried maturity, restraint, and depth that only time could give. The absence from music had not erased her skill. It had reshaped it. Each note felt like a quiet conversation between who she had been and who she had become. There was no anger in it, no sadness, just acceptance. The pianist watched closely, his earlier confidence replaced by respect. He understood now that talent does not always stay visible, that life can pull even the brightest abilities into the background without destroying them. The audience felt the shift too. They were no longer watching a surprise guest. They were witnessing a story unfold through sound. A story without words but filled with meaning. Some people thought of dreams they had put aside. Others thought of choices they had made. The music touched places beyond entertainment. It reached memory. It reached emotion. It reached honesty. The woman continued, steady and composed, her breathing calm, her posture relaxed. The stage no longer felt intimidating. It felt familiar, welcoming. She was not performing for validation. She was simply allowing something true to exist. In that moment, the past was no longer a weight. It was a foundation. Everything she had lived through had led her here, not to reclaim a career, not to prove a point, but to reconnect with a part of herself she had never truly lost. The hall remained silent, not out of shock now, but out of respect. People sensed that this was a fragile moment, one that should not be interrupted. The joke that brought her to the stage felt distant and irrelevant, replaced by something meaningful and human, something that reminded everyone present that life does not erase our passions. It only tests how deeply they live within us. Her playing carried on, shaped by experience, by sacrifice, by quiet strength, and as the sound filled the hall, it became clear that this was not just a performance. It was a revelation, not only of her past, but of the truth that talent, once born, never truly disappears. It simply waits for the right moment to be heard again. The first notes had already changed the mood of the hall, but what happened next pushed it even further. The woman's hands no longer hovered with uncertainty. They moved with purpose now, each finger landing where it needed to be, as if the piano itself was guiding her. At first, the melody was simple, almost cautious, but beneath that simplicity lived a deep understanding. She allowed space between notes, letting the sound breathe, letting it settle into the room. The piano answered her gently, its voice warm and clear. The audience leaned forward without realizing it. No one shifted in their seats anymore. No one whispered. No one reached for a phone. The music demanded attention in a quiet way, not by force, but by honesty. The famous pianist felt it too. He stood still beside the piano, listening more closely than he had listened to anyone else that night. His expression slowly changed. The playful confidence faded completely, replaced by focus, then disbelief, then something close to awe. This was not rehearsed brilliance. This was something raw and alive. The woman's shoulders loosened as she continued. Her breathing matched the rhythm of the piece. She no longer felt the lights or the crowd. She felt only the keys beneath her fingers, the slight resistance, the familiar weight, the sound responding instantly to her touch. Her hands remembered more than she expected. They remembered control, balance, timing. They remembered how to shape emotion through pressure and release. They remembered how to turn silence into meaning. The melody began to grow, not louder, but fuller, richer, layered with feeling that seemed to rise from somewhere deep inside her. The notes carried longing, patience, strength, and calm. All at once, people in the audience felt something tighten in their chests. Some did not know why their eyes burned slightly. Others felt a sudden stillness wash over them. The music spoke in a language older than explanation. It reached places words never could. The woman's face remained composed, but inside, something was unfolding. She felt present in a way she had not felt in years, fully awake, fully herself. The doubts that once surrounded her slowly dissolved, replaced by trust, trust in her hands, trust in her heart, trust in the sound she was creating. The piano no longer felt like an object borrowed for a moment, felt like home. The famous pianist shifted his weight slightly, stepping back without realizing it, giving her more space, more room to exist in the moment. For the first time that night, he was not the center of attention, and he knew it. The audience noticed his movement. They noticed the way he watched her now. Quietly, respectfully, no smile, no jokes, just listening, just learning. The music flowed onward. The woman introduced subtle changes, variations that revealed skill and experience. Her fingers moved smoothly, confidently, her hands crossing, lifting, returning with ease. There was nothing rushed, nothing forced. Every note felt intentional. This was not someone trying to impress. This was someone speaking honestly. The hall seemed to shrink around the sound. The vast space suddenly felt intimate, like everyone present had been invited into something private, something sacred. Time felt strange. Minutes passed without anyone noticing. The usual sense of progression disappeared. The audience was suspended inside the music, completely unaware of anything else. The woman's playing grew more expressive. She allowed the melody to swell slightly, then soften again, guiding the sound like a gentle wave. Her control was remarkable, not flashy, not dramatic, but deeply felt. Some people closed their eyes. Others stared without blinking. A few pressed their hands together in their laps, as if grounding themselves. The famous pianist's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in realization. He understood now that this moment was bigger than him, bigger than the joke that brought her here, bigger than reputation or recognition. This was a reminder of why music mattered in the first place. The woman felt a quiet strength building inside her. Each note affirmed something she had almost forgotten, that she was still capable, still connected, still whole. The years away from the piano had not erased her. They had shaped her. The music reached a gentle peak. Not loud, not overwhelming, but emotionally full. The sound filled the hall with warmth, wrapping around the audience like a shared breath. And then, slowly, she began to bring it back down. The melody softened. The notes spaced farther apart. The pace slowed, as if she were carefully guiding the listener toward rest. The audience followed willingly. No one wanted to break the spell. The final section felt tender. Each note landed delicately, almost cautiously. The piano whispered rather than spoke. The woman's fingers moved with care, her touch light but certain. The last note lingered. It did not fade quickly. It hung in the air, vibrating softly, echoing against the walls, settling into silence. The woman lifted her hands slowly from the keys. She remained still, her eyes lowered, her breathing steady. She did not rush to stand. She did not look toward the audience. She allowed the moment to end naturally. The silence that followed was profound. It was not the awkward silence from before, not the uncertain pause of expectation. It was full, complete, respectful. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the famous pianist remained frozen, his eyes fixed on the piano, as if afraid that any movement might disturb what had just happened. Then, somewhere in the hall, a single person began to clap. The sound was soft at first, almost hesitant. Another joined, then another, and suddenly, the hall erupted. Applause surged from every direction, loud, emotional, overwhelming. People stood up without thinking. Chairs shifted. Hands clapped hard and fast. Some people cheered. Others simply applauded with tears in their eyes. The woman looked up, startled. The sound hit her all at once, filling the space where silence had been. Her heart raced, her breath caught. She had not expected this. She had not played for applause. She had played because she needed to. She stood slowly, unsure of what to do. The famous pianist stepped forward. His face changed completely now. He nodded toward her, not as a performer acknowledging a guest, but as one musician recognizing another. The audience continued to applaud. The woman felt overwhelmed. Emotions rose quickly: gratitude, disbelief, relief, something close to peace. She bowed slightly. Instinctively, her movements modest, humble. She glanced at the piano once more. For a brief moment, she rested her hand gently on its surface. A quiet gesture of thanks. Then she stepped back, allowing the sound of applause to carry her forward. The famous pianist spoke softly into the microphone, but his words were almost lost beneath the clapping. Whatever he said mattered less than what had already been understood. The crowd was speechless in a way applause could not fully express. They had come expecting perfection, technique, fame. They had witnessed something far rarer. Truth. The woman returned to the side of the stage, her steps light, her expression calm but emotional. She did not smile broadly. She did not celebrate. She simply breathed, deeply, steadily, as if grounding herself after a long journey. The applause slowly softened, though it did not fade easily. People continued standing, clapping longer than usual, unwilling to let the moment go. The famous pianist waited patiently before returning to the bench, and when he finally sat down again, his posture was different, quieter, more thoughtful. The atmosphere in the hall had changed completely. What began as a joke had transformed into something unforgettable, something that reminded everyone present that talent does not disappear with time, that passion does not die quietly, and that sometimes, the most powerful performances come from those who are no longer trying to prove anything at all. The woman took her seat again among the audience, blending back into the crowd. But she was not the same person who had stood up earlier. Something inside her had shifted, settled, awakened, and the crowd knew it too. They had not just heard music. They had witnessed a moment of truth, one that would stay with them long after the lights dimmed and the hall emptied. A moment born from surprise, shaped by courage, and sealed by the power of a single unexpected performance. The applause slowly settled, not because people wanted it to end, but because the room itself seemed to need a moment to breathe. The sound faded into a deep, meaningful quiet, the kind that follows something powerful and unexpected. The famous pianist remained standing near the piano, his hands no longer relaxed, his posture no longer casual. He looked out at the audience, then back at the woman, and for the first time that night, he did not speak right away. The crowd sensed the shift. This silence was different from all the others before it. It was heavy with realization, with respect, with something unspoken hanging in the air. The pianist cleared his throat softly. His earlier confidence had changed into something more thoughtful, more restrained. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, but even then he hesitated, as if searching for the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, slower, stripped of its earlier humor. He admitted, gently, that he had not expected what had just happened. There was no joke in his tone now, no performance in his voice, only honesty. The audience listened closely, hanging on to every word. He turned toward the woman and nodded again. This time deeper, more deliberate. A gesture that carried respect rather than charm. It was clear to everyone watching that something inside him had shifted. The woman stood quietly at the side of the stage, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She did not seek attention. She did not smile broadly or raise her head proudly. She simply stood there, calm, composed, still processing what had just unfolded. Her heart was still racing, but her breathing had steadied. She felt grounded, present, as if something that had been scattered inside her for years had finally found its place. The audience watched her closely now. They no longer saw a stranger pulled into a joke. They saw a person who had revealed something rare, something deeply human. People leaned toward one another, whispering softly, not with doubt or amusement, but with awe. Some wondered about her story. Some imagined years of quiet sacrifice. Some simply felt grateful to have witnessed the moment. The pianist gestured gently for her to return to her seat, not dismissively, but respectfully. She nodded and began to walk back across the stage. The applause returned briefly, softer this time, warmer, more personal. As she stepped down and moved through the aisle, people turned to look at her, not with curiosity, but with admiration. A few offered small smiles, subtle nods, silent acknowledgments of what she had shared with them through music. She sat back in her seat, blending once again into the crowd. But the feeling inside her was different now. She felt lighter, as if a weight she had carried quietly for years had finally been set down. On stage, the pianist returned to the bench, but he did not begin playing right away. He rested his hands on his knees and stared at the keys, thoughtful, reflective. The audience waited patiently. No one rushed him. No one expected immediate brilliance anymore. The room had changed. The pianist took a slow breath and began to play again. But the sound was different from before. Still skilled, still controlled, but softened, more reflective, less commanding. It was clear that the moment had affected him. His playing now carried a humility that had not been there earlier, as if he, too, was responding to what had just been revealed. The audience listened with renewed attention. They heard not just technique, but emotion, not just mastery, but understanding. Some people glanced back toward the woman seated among them, then back to the stage, connecting the invisible thread between what had happened and what they were hearing now. The pianist finished the piece and stood once more, receiving applause that was strong but thoughtful, appreciative but calm. The kind of applause that comes from genuine connection rather than excitement. As the concert continued, nothing felt the same as it had at the beginning of the night. Every performance carried a new weight. Every pause felt more intentional. Every sound felt more meaningful. The woman remained seated quietly, listening, absorbing, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She did not feel the urge to hide anymore, nor did she feel the need to stand out. She felt complete in a way she had not expected. Her mind drifted briefly to her past, but without regret. She thought of the choices she had made, the paths she had taken, and for the first time, she did not question them. She realized something important. Life had not taken music away from her. It had simply asked her to carry it differently. Around her, the audience remained deeply engaged. Some wiped their eyes discreetly. Others sat with thoughtful expressions. The night had become more than entertainment. It had turned into a shared human experience. When the concert finally came to an end, people rose from their seats slowly, reluctant to break the atmosphere. Applause filled the hall one last time, long and sincere. The pianist bowed, then paused, turning once more toward the audience. He spoke again, briefly, thanking everyone for being part of the evening. His words were simple, but heartfelt. He did not mention the joke. He did not explain the moment. He did not need to. Everyone already understood. As people began to leave, conversations buzzed softly through the hall. Strangers spoke to one another as if they had shared something personal. Many said it was the most memorable concert they had ever attended, not because of fame or perfection, but because of truth. The woman stood and made her way toward the exit, moving slowly, thoughtfully. She felt no rush. She felt present, grounded, whole. A few people caught her eye and smiled. One person quietly said thank you as she passed. She nodded gently, her heart full. Outside, the night air felt cool and refreshing. The city lights glowed softly. Sounds of traffic and distant voices blended into a gentle hum. She paused for a moment, standing still beneath the open sky. For years, she had believed that chapter of her life was closed. But now she understood that it had never truly ended. It had simply been waiting. Inside the hall, the piano stood silent once more. But its echo remained, not just in the walls, but in the hearts of everyone who had been there. The famous pianist lingered backstage, thoughtful, quiet. He replayed the moment in his mind, not with embarrassment, but with gratitude. He had learned something that night, something no award or applause could teach. Talent is not always loud. Greatness does not always announce itself, and humility can arrive in the most unexpected way. The audience carried the story home with them, retelling it to friends, to family, each version slightly different, but all carrying the same truth. And for the woman, walking away under the night sky, the music continued softly inside her. Not demanding, not urgent, just present, steady, alive. The crowd had been speechless, but what remained afterward was deeper than words, a reminder that life, like music, often reveals its most powerful moments when we least expect them. And when it does, it leaves us forever changed. The applause rose again, stronger and more unified than before. Not the polite clapping that often followed performances, but a full, heartfelt response that seemed to come from somewhere deeper. People stood almost at the same time. Chairs shifted. Hands came together with energy and emotion. The sound filled every corner of the hall. The woman remained still for a moment, surprised by how intense it felt. She had already returned to her seat, expecting the night to move on quietly, but now the attention circled back to her without warning. She felt the vibration of the applause through the floor, through the seat, through her chest. She looked around and saw faces turned toward her, not staring, not judging, but smiling, nodding, acknowledging. Strangers who moments ago knew nothing about her were now connected to her in a way that did not need words. Her first instinct was to shrink back, to disappear into the crowd again. But something inside her gently resisted that urge. Not pride, not excitement, just acceptance. She stood slowly. The movement felt natural, unforced, like a response rather than a decision. As she rose, the applause grew even louder. Waves of sound rolled over her. Some people smiled widely, some clapped with eyes shining, some simply watched with quiet respect. She did not bow dramatically or raise her hands. She placed one hand over her chest for a brief moment. A small, honest gesture that came from gratitude rather than performance. The famous pianist noticed immediately. He stopped what he was doing and turned toward her. The expression on his face held no trace of earlier humor or confidence, only sincerity. He began clapping as well, slowly at first, then with strength. His applause was not louder than the crowd, but it carried weight. Others followed his lead. The applause shifted from celebration to recognition, as if the room collectively agreed that this moment deserved to be honored properly. The woman felt her eyes sting slightly. She blinked and took a steady breath. She reminded herself to stay grounded, to stay present. This was not about becoming someone else. This was about being who she already was. She remained standing as the sound continued, allowing it to pass through her rather than overwhelm her. The noise was powerful, but it did not feel chaotic. It felt warm, supportive, human. Somewhere in the hall, someone let out a soft cheer. Another person followed, then another, not loud, not wild, just expressions of genuine appreciation. The woman looked toward the stage briefly. The piano stood there quietly now, no longer under the spotlight, but still central to everything that had happened. She felt no urge to return to it. The connection had already been made, the conversation already spoken. She turned slightly, acknowledging the people around her. A few met her gaze and smiled. One older woman nodded slowly with a look of understanding. Another person clasped their hands together, as if moved beyond words. The applause continued longer than usual. It did not rush to end. No one seemed eager to sit back down. The moment was being held carefully, as if everyone sensed that once it passed, it could never be recreated. The woman finally lowered herself back into her seat. Slowly, gently, the applause softened but did not stop right away. It lingered, then gradually faded into a quiet murmur. People exhaled. The room breathed again. A calm settled over the hall, different from the calm at the beginning of the night. This one felt earned, shared, meaningful. The famous pianist stepped forward and spoke again. His words were simple and few. He did not praise excessively. He did not explain or analyze. He acknowledged the moment for what it was. Rare, honest, unforgettable. The audience listened closely, nodding, some smiling softly. When he finished speaking, there was another brief round of applause, respectful and warm. Then the hall slowly returned to stillness. The concert continued, but the energy had changed permanently. Every note that followed felt shaped by what had happened. Every pause carried more meaning. Every sound seemed to hold a quiet awareness of something larger than performance. The woman listened attentively, her posture relaxed, her hands resting easily. She no longer felt like a guest in someone else's world. She felt like a participant in a shared experience. Her thoughts drifted briefly. She thought about the years she had spent believing that part of her life was over, about how carefully she had protected herself from disappointment, from regret, from longing. She realized now that she had not been protecting herself from pain. She had been protecting something precious. And tonight, she had finally allowed it to breathe again. Around her, the audience remained deeply engaged. Conversations did not resume. Phones stayed tucked away. Attention stayed focused. It felt as if everyone wanted to honor what had happened by being fully present for the rest of the night. When the final piece ended and the concert officially closed, the applause returned once more, strong and sincere. But it carried a different tone now, gratitude rather than excitement. People rose slowly from their seats, gathering coats and bags. But no one rushed toward the exits. Conversations started quietly, respectful of the atmosphere that still lingered. Strangers spoke to strangers, sharing reactions, describing feelings they struggled to explain. Many mentioned the unexpected moment, not with shock, but with appreciation. The woman stood and joined the flow of people moving toward the exit. She walked calmly, her steps unhurried. She felt no need to avoid eye contact now. When people glanced at her, she met their eyes briefly and smiled softly. A few people offered quiet words as she passed, simple phrases. "Thank you. That was beautiful. I will never forget that." She nodded gently each time, the words settling warmly in her chest. She stepped outside into the night air. The city felt quieter than before, or maybe she was simply listening differently now. Lights reflected off the pavement. Distant sounds drifted by. Everything felt clear and present. She paused near the entrance and took a deep breath. The night sky stretched above her, open and calm. She felt grounded, centered, complete in a way she had not felt in years. She did not think about what would come next. She did not plan or predict. She allowed the moment to exist as it was, enough on its own. Inside the hall, people continued to talk softly, sharing the story they had just lived through. Not as gossip, not as spectacle, but as something meaningful. The famous pianist remained inside for a while longer, speaking quietly with a few people, his demeanor calm, reflective. He knew the night would be remembered, not for his skill, but for what had been revealed. He understood now that music was not only about mastery, but about openness, about listening, about humility. The audience carried the experience with them as they left. Some walked in silence, others spoke softly, but all felt changed in small, personal ways. The woman walked away from the hall slowly, blending into the night, not seeking attention, not avoiding it, simply moving forward. She did not feel the need to define what had happened. She did not need to give it meaning. The meaning had already settled quietly inside her. The standing ovation had not crowned her. It had recognized her. And that recognition did not belong to the stage. It belonged to the moment, to the shared humanity, to the reminder that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones we least expect to hear. As she disappeared into the crowd, the echo of the applause remained, not as noise, but as understanding lingering softly, like a final note that never truly fades. The night did not end when the lights dimmed and the hall emptied. For many, it followed them home quietly, settling into their thoughts, reshaping the way they remembered the evening. The story continued, not on stage, but inside each person who had been there. The woman walked through the city streets with a calm she had not felt in a long time. The noise around her felt distant, softened, as if the world had slowed just enough for her to notice it again. Her steps were steady, unhurried. She was not replaying the moment over and over. She was letting it rest. For years, she had believed that certain doors, once closed, stayed that way forever, that life moved forward without looking back. But now she understood something different. Some doors do not close, they wait, quietly, patiently, without demand. As she walked, she thought about the piano, not the grand one on stage, but the small, worn one from her early years, the sound of its imperfect keys, the way it had taught her to listen before she learned to perform. She smiled softly at the memory. The night air felt cool against her face, grounding her in the present. She did not feel the urge to rush home or to tell someone what had happened. The experience felt complete on its own, like a story that did not need retelling to be real. Elsewhere, members of the audience returned to their homes, some alone, some with others. Conversations replayed the moment in different words, but the feeling remained the same, a quiet sense of wonder, a reminder that life still held surprises worth paying attention to. Some thought about their own hidden talents, others thought about choices they had made, dreams they had set aside, passions they had silenced for the sake of responsibility. The woman's playing had not judged them. It had simply reminded them. Inside the empty hall, the piano sat in silence, its keys untouched, but its presence felt different now, as if it too carried memory. The famous pianist lingered backstage, long after most people had left. He sat alone for a while, thinking. He had performed in countless halls, received endless praise, stood before audiences who admired him deeply. But this night felt different. It had taught him something no rehearsal ever had. Something about listening rather than leading, about humility rather than control. He realized that his joke had revealed more than he intended, not just about her, but about himself, about assumptions he did not know he carried. He felt no shame in that realization, only gratitude. The woman reached her home and paused before going inside. She looked up at the sky once more, letting the quiet settle. She did not know if she would play again soon, or where or how. She did not need to know. What mattered was that the music had not left her. It never had. In the days that followed, the story spread gently, not through headlines or viral clips, but through conversation, through memory, through people describing a moment they could not fully explain but could not forget. It became a story about humility, about surprise, about the danger of underestimating others, but also about grace, about what happens when someone chooses courage over comfort. The woman returned to her routine, to work, to responsibilities, to ordinary moments, but something inside her had shifted. She noticed small changes, the way she listened more carefully, the way she trusted herself a little more, the way silence felt less empty. One evening, she found herself opening a piano she had not touched in years. Its surface dusty, its keys slightly stiff. She sat down without pressure, without expectation, and played quietly, not to perform, not to impress, just to reconnect. The sound filled the room gently. It was enough. The pianist continued his career, but those who attended his future performances noticed a change. His playing felt more open, more thoughtful, less focused on perfection and more on connection. He spoke less, listened more, allowed space for unpredictability. He never mentioned the woman by name, never turned the moment into a story for applause. He carried it privately, letting it shape him quietly. The audience members carried it too, in different ways. Some enrolled in classes they had once abandoned. Some picked up old hobbies. Some simply became kinder in their judgments, more patient in their expectations. The lesson of the night was not dramatic or loud. It was simple. People are more than they appear. Talent does not vanish, and humility opens doors pride cannot. The woman never sought recognition, never claimed the moment as a turning point. She did not need to. The value of it lived inside her, steady and calm. Occasionally, she attended concerts again, sitting quietly as before, but now with a deeper sense of belonging. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She felt like someone who understood both sides of the stage. The night became a quiet reminder. Not a peak, not a climax, but a confirmation. Life does not always give us second chances in the way we expect. Sometimes it gives us moments, and what we do with those moments is what matters. The crowd had been left speechless that evening, not because of surprise alone, but because something honest had unfolded before them, something that could not be planned or repeated. It reminded them that greatness is not always announced by spotlight or applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through a single choice, a single breath, a single note played without fear. The woman carried that truth with her as she moved forward, not as a burden, but as a companion, a gentle presence that reminded her of who she was and who she could be whenever she chose. The piano keys would always be there, so would the music, and so would the lesson that stayed with everyone who witnessed it. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never confuse humility with weakness. And never forget that sometimes the most powerful stories are written in moments we never planned for, but recognize only when they finally arrive.